Okay, so we'll crack on. So obviously today is all about how are we planning for net zero in transport here at Aberdeen City Council level. So the first thing is, let's look at the sort of the overarching policy and kind of strategy idea. So the net zero vision for Aberdeen and supporting strategic infrastructure plan was approved in May 2020. So that was our kind of overarching guide for how we're going to get towards net zero for the city. And in transport terms, it contains pedestrian, cycling, public transport, car club, electric vehicle and hydrogen developments. So there's a lot of ways in which transport can contribute towards this net zero vision. At actual council level itself, our climate change plan 2021 to 2025 towards a net zero and climate resilient council was just approved this month, actually in March 2021, and that's going to entail basically how we become a net zero and climate resistant council and how we basically, I suppose, streamline our council assets and operations by 2045 to make sure that we can hit that net zero target. There are interim targets there as well to help keep us on track. So a reduction of at least 48% by 2025, and a reduction of at least 75% by 2030. And that's against the 2015-2016 council baseline. Some of the projects that we're looking at in part of that are zero emission fleet, low carbon fleet infrastructure, reduced emissions from staff travel, so when we're going to meetings or going out and about and doing our site visits and things, and also resilient design and management of our infrastructure. What does that mean for our own transport strategies and plans in the council? Well, we've got a local transport strategy that was completed in 2016, and that already had the goal of cleaner, greener transport system, and a transport system that facilitates healthy and sustainable living. So there's already an environmental commitment in there as part of the, I suppose, foundation of our local transport strategy. We know from Rab's presentation that the next regional transport strategy, which is almost finalised, has the priority of significantly reduced carbon emissions from transport to support net zero by 2045. So when we're, I suppose, aligning our own council documents, that's something we're obviously going to have to be working towards. Our next local development plan, so dealing with land use in the city, is under development, and that will continue to maintain sustainable transport policies. So encouraging new developments to think about the walking, the cycling, the public transport movements to try and ensure that people are moving around as, I suppose, kind of carbon neutral as possible. And our next local transport strategy for Aberdeen, which we're going to be starting work on soon, will reflect the council's net zero position and also transpose the net zero themes through from the regional transport strategy to our local level as well. And I suppose more specifically, our updated Aberdeen Active Travel Action Plan was approved in February 2021, and that's going to take forward the walking and cycling aspects of what we're looking to do in transport strategy for the next 5 years. And our electric vehicle framework was also approved in February 2021, and that's going to look at what we can do as a city to try and encourage a greater uptake of electric vehicles and how we're going to do that all the way through to 2030. We already had the Aberdeen Hydrogen Strategy published in 2015, and a large part of that is sustainable hydrogen production and using that for transport purposes. Our Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan for the city centre is a document that looks at how we can move around the city centre in basically a more sustainable fashion. So how can we prioritise walking, cycling and public transport movements to make that more efficient? Moving on to the next slide. So what does this mean for active travel improvements? Well, we're looking at multimodal corridor studies on the Bridge of Dawn to Garthdee, the Wellington Road, the A96, the A944 and the A9119 corridors. So how can we facilitate more journeys by different modes along these corridors and make it better for walking, cycling and public transport? We're also looking at improved pedestrian wayfinding infrastructure around the city. So how can we encourage people to move around the city on foot? How can we make it feel more legible? And how can we facilitate that? So better information in car parks, at gateways to city, whether that's on the edge of the city centre or whether it's access points like the ferry terminal, the park and rides. And again, looking at the links between the beach and the city, because we know there are two big destinations, the beach and the city centre. So how can we encourage more walking, cycling movements between those areas without encouraging people to use the car? We've also got trail maps that are produced for little walking trails around the city. So encourage people with a trail to get out and about and walk more. And they're currently available as hard copies, but also be incorporated into a journey planning app that we're working on in the city. We've also got things like cycle lockers that we hire out to the public, again, just to make it a bit more easy and a bit more safe and secure for people that are cycling around the city. And we have things like our Aberdeen cycle map, which is available online and also as a hard copy, just again showing people what network is out there. And we're working on a bike hire scheme, which has been awarded, and it should launch this year. And that will bring on-street, pay-as-you-go cycle hire to the people of Aberdeen. So that was our active travel side. And what are we doing for public transport? Well, the council is a partner in the North East Bus Alliance, along with Nestrans and Aberdeenshire Council and the bus operators, to name a few. And as part of the partnership, they've bid to the Bus Partnership Fund, which is a fund organised by Transport Scotland. And they've pulled a bid together, which is due to be submitted next month, and a decision is expected in June. And that bid's focused around 3 areas in which we're looking to develop the public transport network. So part of that's appraisal and business case development for Aberdeen Rapid Transit. So how can we bring a bus-based rapid transit system to Aberdeen to make public transport more attractive? And also look at delivery of significant bus priority and associated measures on each of the Bus Alliance priority corridors in Aberdeen. So that's linked to the park and ride sites, and based on recommendations and findings of various studies that have been commissioned to try and look at how we can improve public transport. And those main corridors are the A944, the A9119, the Ellen to Garthdee corridor, the A96 towards Stonehaven, and via Wellington Road. So it marries up quite nicely with those multimodal corridors that we're looking at. So effectively, how can we look at the main corridors into Aberdeen, and how can we make public transport work more efficiently on those corridors? What advantages can we bring in to make that work? And the third priority is look at the delivery of Aberdeen Rapid Transit. So that's how could it be phased, basically looking at things like the ticketing, looking at things like the vehicles they're going to use. So it's a whole case all the way through of how can we develop it and how can we make it work. And there's already a low carbon emphasis on public transport, given that we now have the hydrogen double-decker buses that were launched in Aberdeen in January 2021. So that was public transport. Now what about other vehicles in Aberdeen? What are we doing for them? Well, we're adding to our publicly available electric vehicle charge point network with new units going in across the city. Frederick Street Car Park, we're currently building a hub. You can see it under development in the picture there. We've got the Aberdeen Car Club already, which provides people with the use of a car without needing to own one. And that reduces car dependency and also parking pressures. And Co-Wheels, who are a car club partner in Aberdeen, they've got 53 vehicles all around the city that can be hired by members of the public or businesses. And in Aberdeen, 73% of that fleet is either hybrid or pure EV, or it's powered by hydrogen. So we've already got a lot of low emission vehicles, and quite a number that are actually zero emission at the tailpipe. And the council books 10 of those vehicles basically as pool cars, and all of the ones that we book are all zero emission at the tailpipe. So encouraging staff to take a car club car instead of their own vehicle is instantly reducing the tailpipe emissions of those staff travel journeys. And our local development plan also already has electric vehicle and car club parking standards built into it. So we're getting it right in new developments from the off, building in that provision for how are people going to charge their zero emission electric vehicles, and also do they actually need to use a car, or can they find another way of getting access to one in the case of the car club. So another big project that's going on in Aberdeen just now is looking at a low emission zone covering a part of the city centre. So the Scottish Government have committed to having low emission zones in the main 4 cities in Scotland by the end of 2022. So Aberdeen started an option appraisal to look at how we do that in 2019. There's been consultation and engagement, which took place in autumn 2020, and more than 500 businesses and individuals responded. So the options will be whittled down to 2 options now, which at the final stages of appraisal, looking at them in more detail, and we're aiming to report recommendations to a council committee in 2021 before publishing LEZ plans in autumn. And we hope to have a final low emission zone agreed by councillors in late 2021, and then that'll be submitted to the Scottish ministers for approval. And Aberdeen aims to formally declare a low emission zone in February to May 2022, in line with Scottish Government timescales. But even once a zone's built in, there'll still be a grace period until enforcement comes in, so people have still got a bit of time to get used to it before obviously we start properly enforcing that low emission zone. So that's looking at the actual modes themselves. So what can we do to actually try and encourage people to find out more about these and try and use them? So putting in the infrastructure is one way, but I think also engaging with people and trying to put in place things to incentivise them is really important too. So as part of Aberdeen City Council, we're a partner in what's called the Get About Partnership. So it's a load of basically public sector companies in the Northeast, all have a travel planning interest, and all getting together to pool the resources to try and encourage more travel planning, more sustainable transport, and tell members of the public about it. So it promotes and facilitates sustainable transport in the northeast of Scotland. Aberdeen City uses Smarter Choices, Smarter Places funding, which is external funding we get from the Scottish Government to fund a lot of these schemes. And we structure them around basically citywide schemes, get about in the city. We have ones tailored towards education, so schools and universities. We have ones that are tailored to active travel specifically, and we have ones that are all about low carbon vehicle. And the sort of things that we're taking forward to basically engage with the public, make them more aware of what's going on. We have radio and bus ads, we do events with members of the public, like In Town Without My Car Day, which we do annually, where we have a big sort of street festival basically going on in the city. We do promotional materials, so we hand things out to encourage people and tell them what's going on. We deliver campaigns and initiatives around different modes, and incentives are taken forward as well, whether that's sort of subsidising car club cars, for example, helping to make public transport cheaper, but also things like partnership working is really important at the heart of this. We can try and do what we can as our own, but we've got far more effect if we work with different companies and we keep that message consistent, and that's where Get About's been invaluable. Another thing that you probably haven't been able to avoid over the last 12 months or so is obviously the effect that COVID-19 restrictions have had on our movement. So Aberdeen, back in about May last year, made a bid to Sustrans for £1.76 million, and that was for a project called Spaces for People. The idea being, let's bring in some temporary infrastructure to keep people safe, to learn to physically distance, and to move around during these COVID-19 restrictions. So temporary infrastructure was brought in to encourage or create more pedestrian, cycle and bus priority spaces, given they were seen as the most resilient forms of transport. And monitoring has also been undertaken to establish how well used this has been, whether people can use this temporary infrastructure safely, how they perceive it, and basically to establish what effect COVID-19 has had on the wider transport network. And enforced working from home, with the continued promotion of exercise, we think could also lead to some continued behaviour change. So it's going to be interesting to see what the long-term effect is on the transport network. Have people got more of a taste now for working from home, for walking, for cycling, as a result of, I suppose, kind of having it forced upon them by COVID-19? So we're keen to keep monitoring just to see what effect that has on our network. And we've said it already, but I think one key strand in taking any scheme forward, especially around the sort of the net zero vision, is partnership working. We know as a council, as a transport strategy team, we can't do it alone, and we rely very heavily on the support of other teams in the council and the expertise of them. We also rely on the external partners, whether that's NHS, whether it's Nestrans, whether it's the business community, to try and make sure we get things right. And we rely on the members of the public as well. Public feedback and public support for the schemes we do is absolutely invaluable. So we've got to make sure that we're taking the public's wishes into account to make sure we get it right. So we all have a part to play, and we're hugely thankful to everyone that's played their part so far. We know it's going to be a big challenge. We know it's going to take a few years to adapt to the net zero vision to fulfill all the potential, but we're so glad that we've got so many people that are there to help us, and we thank you so much for what you do. So thank you for taking the time to listen to me, and thank you again to all the other presenters today. Thank you very much.